There was a time when any series from id Software would have immediately demanded respect. Games like Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, and Quake represent the origins of one of the most popular genres in gaming today. But the titles that have been released recently as part of those classic franchises have been underwhelming, to say the least. Surprisingly enough, Wolfenstein The New Order manages to live up to its lineage while simultaneously dragging the franchise kicking and screaming into the modern age of storytelling. Wolfenstein's story kicks off in 1946, just in time to watch the Allies lose the Second World War. You wake up from a coma in 1960, in a world completely controlled by the Nazis. The world in which Wolfenstein takes place is quite interesting, even if it is mostly fleshed out using newspaper clippings and collectibles scattered haphazardly around the game's environments. Alternate histories in which the Nazis won the war are nothing new, but Wolfenstein injects just enough detail to distinguish itself from the pack. However, Wolfenstein's story isn't special because of the world it takes place in. The characters make it special. I don't believe you could have ever convinced me that you could make a protagonist named BJ Blazkowicz relatable, but the New Order somehow nails it, using his interactions with other characters to flesh out someone who was, up until this point, a one-dimensional super soldier. Everyone you interact with has a story behind their face, whether they are villainous, heroic, or somewhere in between. But the game has a problem with consistency. Sometimes character development is done very well using in-game sequences or cutscenes, but far too often you are forced to read a lengthy block of text in a menu in order to learn their backstories. It's not just here that Wolfenstein has consistency problems. The game fully embraces the shooter mechanics of Days Gone Past, littering environments with health packs and armor pickups, encouraging you to adopt a run-and-gun style of gameplay, even though the stealth mechanics available are some of the best I've ever seen in a shooter. While enormously refreshing in a post-Halo world full of shooters with fully recharging shields and health, it presents a major problem. On the one hand, you have a game that very much intends to be serious and thought-provoking, going as far as to place you in a Nazi labor camp at one point, even managing to do so in a relatively tasteful way. But on the other hand, you have a game that approaches violence and murder with uninhibited glee, an emotion that the protagonist often explicitly expresses in his inner monologue.
Right. Nazi's dead. Nazi robot's dead. Broke all your shit. Helicopter secured.
This gives you a protagonist who is lamenting the horrors of war one minute and extolling its virtues the next. It is a bit jarring, to say the least, but also not entirely unexpected from a shooter that tries to dig a bit deeper with its story. Eventually, I learned to look past the discrepancy between Wolfenstein's story and its gameplay, and I began to treat them each as discrete elements of a whole. When you do this, each element is fantastic. The story is well written and interesting throughout, with great characters on both sides, while the gameplay is a fantastic throwback to the id games that so many of us grew up playing. Now, Wolfenstein is by no means a masterpiece. The storytelling has a nasty tendency to fall back on pages full of text, and near the game's midpoint, the strategy for combat encounters completely changes from run around and shoot everything in the face to a more conservative style of play requiring cover, potshots, and more frequent use of the stealth mechanics. But the fact remains that the one word I constantly use to describe Wolfenstein in conversation is fun. Its gleeful approach to combat is fun in a way that so few modern games, shackled to their drab settings and their tired and true AAA narratives, seem to capture. So go ahead, pick this one up, and just have some fun with it.